joining us for another episode of the Sunflower Nation Women in Leadership. Today, I am so excited for our guest, Miss Sheila R. Burns-Owens, author, and she is going to tell us a little bit about her journey and where she is now. Sheila, welcome to our show. Welcome to our platform. We're so excited to learn about you and your journey. Can you tell us a little bit about you, where what your background is? And we know you're an author. So tell us a little bit about how you got from little Sheila Owens to becoming the Sheila Burns-Owens author.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited about this. And I'm Sheila. That's who I am. And I am an author, first-time author. I wrote a memoir, in which we'll talk about more later, but I am an author. So that's the new part of me, what I would call my next chapter. So I am a sister. I have siblings. I am a wife. I've been married. It'll be 44 years next month.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
When I grow up, I want to be just like you.
I'm the mother of two children, two adult children. People keep reminding me that my children are adults, but adult children. I am a grandmother of three. I am a minister, ordained minister. I own my own business, which is Her Second Stitch, and I'm a retired educator. Retired educator.
When I grow up, I want to be just like you.
And right now, I am a traveler. I'm a traveler. I love traveling. I do a lot of traveling every chance I get. So that's who I am.
That's amazing. A
Yeah.
mom, a wife, a minister, an author, a traveler. I mean, honestly, like I'm joking when I say it, but in a lot of ways, honestly, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. We share a lot in common. I am a mom, I am a wife. I have a very, 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 very close relationship with our Lord and Savior. Um, Everything that I do is grounded in my Christian principles. And so, and everyone knows I love to travel. So we do have a lot in common. I'm just hoping to get to that 44-year mark. And of course, I'm an educator. I'm an educator as well. So we have
Yeah.
so much in common. I don't even know where to start. So Sheila, tell us a little bit about where you come from. Where are you from? Your family origins,
Okay.
how you were raised.
Okay. Actually, my family roots is actually Johns Island, South Carolina. We're Geechees. Both my mother and father was born in South Carolina. Ironically, they lived on the same road, River Road, but they didn't meet each other until they both were in New York. So my mother went from South Carolina to Harlem. I was born in New York. I lived in Harlem for the first 10 years of my life. And then we moved to the Bronx. And I lived in the Bronx until I graduated from high school. And then I went to school in Washington, D.C., Howard University. And I actually met my husband. I was at Howard University. He was at Bowie State, and we met in what's called a stay in school program. We were good friends, and then we started dating. And then right after I graduated, we got married the following year, and we've been together ever since. Yeah. And now I live in Teaneck, New Jersey, and my church is in Teaneck, New Jersey, First Baptist Church of Teaneck. And as far as, I guess I need to go back. I taught in Harlem for 14 years. After that, I became an administrator in Harlem for 2 years. Then I went to Mount Vernon, New York, and continued as an educator. And I retired from Mount Vernon, New York. And since then, I just living my best life. For some reason, I started quilting, and it ended up becoming a business. I learned how to string quilt, and I've been making string quilt pillows. So I do have a business, Her Second Stitch, which is my second stitch. And now this being an author is part of my next chapter.
I love this. Oh my goodness. So tell me about, let's get, are you an only child? Do you have siblings?
Oh, okay. Oh, don't let me
You
get
said
in
you're a
trouble.
sister, so I know you have some
In my
siblings.
mind, I'm an only child. I actually have 3 sisters and I had 1 brother. So I'm a middle child, and I'm a typical middle child. I do have a younger sister, but I feel like I was the baby because she came 5 years later. So I was a baby for a while, and I haven't gotten past that.
She came to and ruined all your fun. Awesome. So let's get to, how did you get to Howard? 5 kids. Your parents had 5 kids. Did you all go to college?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Were your parents educators?
My mother's a retired educator.
Okay.
2 of my sisters are also retired educators. We all taught in Harlem, what used to be District 5. So yes, my father owned a business on Lenox Avenue, Reliable Cleaners on 141st Street in Lenox Avenue, and my brother actually owned the business also. So it seems like the men in the family became entrepreneurs, business owners, and the females became educators.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very
Yes.
interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you taught in Harlem. What grade level did you teach?
I started with 3rd grade, which I loved. I taught 3rd grade for like 9 years, and then I went up to 4th grade, and then I'm like, okay, why did I stay in 3rd grade so long? I love 4th grade, and then when I went up to 5th grade, it was even better. Um, but then I ended up coming out of the classroom, and I could have stayed. Looking back, I should have stayed a little longer in the classroom because I loved it. Because once you get out of the classroom, you deal with politics, and I was happy in my little corner, minding my business, educating my students. But I did come out of the classroom and then eventually became an administrator. Philosophy, but my philosophy is children first. And unfortunately, I found out that children, unfortunately, not always first.
Right, right.
And I hate to say rarely first, but not always first. Yeah.
So tell me, how long were you in education before you decided to retire?
I was in education for 31 years. I was ready to retire. I went the last 3 years of working. I was trying to retire. I was ready to retire. It just became a chore. And I tell people when I talk to people about retirement, I said it's an individual thing. It's when you get to a point where you know that you used to love what you was doing, and now it becomes work. I love teaching. I love students. I love educating students. I love being with students. I love talking to students. I love guiding students. And when it became work because of the political part, when it became work because of parents and administrators doing things that I thought was harmful for children, I said, I can't continue in this system.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
get it 100%. I get it 100%.
And I still keep in touch with a lot of my students, including A student that I had in third grade, she's now married with children. It's quite a few of my students that I still keep in touch with. Quite a few of my parents that I still keep in touch with. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and I'm talking about from the beginning when I started teaching.
And that's the essence of a true educator,
Yes.
right? So often I say, the kids are not going to realize what you're doing for them right now. It's like 5, 10, 20 years later that they
Yes.
show up.
Yes.
And funny enough, yesterday I was teaching a class and somebody walks in and I look and it's one of my former students and she has cupcakes and brownies for me. And I'm like, oh my, and it's funny. Again, with college students, they're on a college campus. Many of them live on campus. They're away from their families. And so I make it a practice to be like, I love you.
Mhm.
Oh,
Mm,
they always laugh at me. I'm like, listen, when you're on campus and you're away from your parents and your family, how often does your roommate say, I love you?
I know.
Probably not
No.
often, right? And so I'm making my business to tell them, if nobody told you today, I love you all.
Yes.
And they laugh at me and they're like, Dr. Banks, you're crazy. And I'm like, you say that now, but you're gonna remember one day when you're having a bad day, and you're not feeling appreciated and you're not feeling good enough. If nobody else told you, Dr. Banks loves you.
Love you. Yes. Yes. And they need that. They need that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
So tell me about your educational experience. I know you said you went to Howard. Let's start
Hmm.
there, right?
Okay.
Such an important decision. So tell me about how did you choose Howard as the school that you would go to, the college you were going to go to?
Actually, my mother went to Central State in Ohio, and she wanted her children to follow in her footsteps. Um, I was not feeling it. She was insisting, but there was something happened at Central State. It was a hurricane or something. So that's how I got out of her to ask me, trying to insist on me going to
Won't he do it?
to,
Yes, he
to
will.
Xenia, Ohio. So, but I was looking at schools in my area, and I had visited different schools. But when I got to Howard campus, I knew that was my fit because I lived in Harlem. I lived in the Bronx. I still needed to be like part of the city, but out of the city. So the fact that Hampton, why do I keep saying Hampton? How it had was like in the middle of the city, but yet you can not be part of the city. Um, Plus, it's a historic Black college, so
It's the Mecca.
that to me it was a no brainer. And from my parents, it's like, okay, 4 hours away, you can go.
Right, right, definitely.
So I majored in elementary education. Um, Teaching has always been my passion. Even as a child, I played teacher. My mother was a teacher. I was always going to her classrooms. I would correct test papers, her Friday spelling tests or math tests. I would give advice on her decorating of her bulletin boards and things like that. When she was have school plays, I would go and help. So I knew that was what I wanted to do. Even in high school, I was part of the Future Teachers of America, and I in the afternoons in my senior year, I went to one of the elementary schools and did tutoring. So I knew that was what I wanted to do. And from Howard, I did go to Maryland U for a little while because when I graduated, I still stayed in the DC area. I lived in Maryland. Um, what's interesting is my plan was to go to Emory in Atlanta, and my husband to be had other plans. So as soon as I graduated, he proposed. So
Ah,
instead of relocating to Atlanta, I'm like, okay, I'll stay in Maryland and go to Maryland University. But I had a hard time finding a permanent teaching job. I was subbing for a while, and every year my mother was saying there's plenty of openings in schools in New York, in Harlem. So we surprisingly, my husband loves DC, but surprisingly we relocated to the Bronx, and we stayed in the Bronx for a couple of years, and then we moved to Teaneck, and we actually moved to Teaneck because I was looking for a multicultural community for my children. So we moved to Teaneck, and while I was teaching, I started going to City College. I got a master's in reading, and then I got a master's in administration and supervision. Um, then I said, okay, I'm finished with school, and then I was called into the ministry. So I'm like, God, you're making a mistake. You have the wrong person. First,
he
but I
makes
ended
no
up.
mistakes. He
I
makes
know,
no mistakes.
I know. I'm like, God, it can't be me. Do you know me?
And he responded, "Yes, I do. Do you know me?" Mm.
And in ministry, and I've been in ministry. I actually was licensed in 2002. So I've been in ministry for over 20 years. But it took me a while to understand why God would choose someone like me for ministry. And and the thing is that, I can tell everybody else why God calls them just for everyday life. But my experiences was the reason he called me into ministry, because there were people that needed to see someone that was broken that God called. And and I can say that now I understand, and people understand, because Sheila is Sheila no matter what. It's not okay, Reverend Sheila. Sheila is Sheila. I am the same, no matter where I am. So people feel comfortable talking to me. People feel comfortable with me talking to them. So ministry, just other than me thinking at first that I wasn't worthy, until I understood that everyone's worthy.
Absolutely.
Everyone's worthy of God's love, and God has something for each and every one of us. So I ended up in seminary in New Brunswick Theological Seminary. And it took me 5.5 years in seminary. In fact, I graduated at age 50. And I'm like, okay, God, why did you wait so long? And then I realized that I had to do that mothering part before I can do the next part,
Right.
because that next part would have take away from my mothering part. So my daughter was getting ready to go to college. My son was already in college. Other than the fact that I didn't expect 3 tuitions, but God brought me through that also. So um, I became I graduated from seminary to 2008, and I became ordained in 2009. And
Beautiful, 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 beautiful.
yes, yes.
Is your husband also in ministry?
He's actually the chairman of the deacon board at First Baptist Church at Teaneck. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
So it's interesting.
So you say you questioned why God would take someone like you, right? Somebody
Mhm.
who had flaws or who was broken, if I use your exact words. Um,
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about that. What makes you feel like you were broken?
First of all, um, I I I think I shocked everyone that knows me. I am a middle child. Um, my 2 oldest sisters followed the rules. My brother and I, who are in the middle, our job was to break the rules. So when God is saying, okay, I'm calling you. I'm like, no, those are the two that follows the rules. We're the two that break the rules. So, so when my mother heard, I guess it took her a while, but what was interesting is that I went from this is Sheila, my middle child, to this is my daughter. She's a minister, and it's like okay, a whole new identity, because I basically did everything to get attention, and it wasn't in the good ways.
Hmm.
Um, even I thank God that I wasn't in school with my sister too long, but when we first started out in Harlem, she was first, then my brother. She didn't did everything that she was supposed to do. My brother had to test everything, and then here I come, and then all I can hear is, "Oh, your sister's so quiet. Why are you this? Why are you that? Your sister this, your sister that." So when we moved to the Bronx, I was glad that we were in different schools, and from then on, we were in different schools because people expected me to be like my sister. And I don't know. Believe it or not, I'm an introvert, but at that time, I just needed to be seen. I needed to be heard. Um, Remember me. So that's that's why I figured, okay, the things that I was doing wasn't I, what I thought a minister was supposed to be.
And it's interesting that you say that because so often people, one of the things that I've been wanting to do is a series of interviews around first ladies, right?
Mm,
Or
mm,
women in ministry, because we have this image in our minds of what they are supposed to be, right?
mhm.
Um, but these are humans, just like us, flawed,
Yes,
right?
yes,
But
yes.
no, the first lady must be,
Mhm,
and the first
mhm,
lady must wear, the minister must be, you know, uh,
mhm.
what what makes them any different than you and I,
Yes,
right?
yes. And
I think it's
and you
important that
you
we
say
show that these are individuals who have a calling on their life, but they weren't born first lady or the reverend or the minister. These were people who lived a life and
mhm,
made mistakes and, kind of walked their own paths and eventually, may have, turned a curve somewhere along the way
mhm,
and started doing things a little bit differently. Uh,
mhm.
and so I think it's so important that we have these conversations to say, you know what, the person that you see in front of you, the wife, the mom, the educator, the author, the seamstress, all of this has a past
Yes,
that
yes.
you don't know anything about. Right.
Mhm.
So when I say at the very beginning, I want to be just like you grow up, right? What does that really mean? Right? What do I have to go through to become you?
And that's the thing.
That's what
And
people don't really,
they don't.
explore.
Mhm,
So tell me
mhm.
if you had to identify one of the challenges that you had to go through to become the woman that you are today, what would you say was one challenge that you had to kind of get over? What was that hurdle?
You know, you know what? Accepting me for me. Um, Not what people wanted me to be. Not um that everybody. It's like everyone has an expectation, and everyone tries to, I guess, pigeonhole you. And with me, I would never fit in those boxes. I never wanted to fit in those boxes. And it wasn't, it was more not me accepting that, it's getting other people to accept that I'm not trying to fit in those boxes. I'm not trying to be what society tells you to be. And I just thought about um how I love natural hair. I always loved natural hair. And people used to say something about nappy hair just so I could hear it. And then when I locked my hair, someone told me, "You'll never get ahead looking like that. Your Afrocentric clothing, your dreadlocks, which has like nothing dread about it, different things like that." And I'm like, you know what? I just had to keep blocking out the noise because I'm saying, you know what? You do you, because I'm gonna do me. And I think I've done me all of my life. That's why I stayed in trouble. I stayed in trouble because I was going to do me, and I'm still doing me. Um, Starting a business and knowing nothing about being in business, writing a book and knowing nothing about being an author. And I'm very impulsive. I jumped into these things and then I backpedal and try to figure it out. But I have the determination that I'm going to make it happen and it's going to happen and I'm going to do it. So the hurdles were to just keep on blocking out the noise. And there
Mm,
was always noise.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, walking in their authentic, true self is something that they never get to do
Mm-hmm.
because they're so concerned with what is mom gonna say, what is dad gonna say, what's society going to say? How are they gonna talk about me? What are they gonna think of me? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to say, no, I was my true self. And maybe I wasn't always accepted or looked at, as
Mm-hmm.
the problem child, if you want to call it that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's who I am.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't even make you the problem child as far as I'm concerned. It makes you the child who was bold.
Mm-hmm.
This is me. Take me as I am. Take it or leave it.
The child is going to carve out her own life instead of having it carved out for you.
Absolutely.
And people say, "Oh, your mother was a teacher. That was you a teacher." I think I was born teaching. it's like and my sisters will say, you my husband too, "Oh no, you were born bossy." No, I just knew what I wanted and how I was going to do it. And that has always been me. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
important. Do you feel like there was a certain point in your life when you realized that? Or was it something you always knew?
I think it was something that I always knew, but I can say that I didn't always embrace it. I would I there was things that I like, okay, like you said, what would my mother say? What would my father say? Um, but both of them knew that I was so outspoken. And I think sometimes they were afraid of what I might say or what I might do. So there was times when I felt like I needed to temper it. But I can tell you one thing with retirement is like I'm doing me no matter what. So and the thing is I didn't wait till retirement, but now I just feel like I answer to God, and
That's
there's
it.
no one else I have to answer to.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
many years have you been retired now?
I retired in 2015.
Oh my goodness, 9 years of freedom. Ah,
And in fact, I retired July 15, 2015, which was my father's birthday. And my book is being was released on July 15th, 2024. So it's like July 15th, I have to have memorable dates.
that's beautiful.
Yes.
That's beautiful. So tell me about your relationship with your parents, right? Being that middle child who was outspoken, uh,
Hmm.
did you always have a good relationship with them? Was there a time in your life where that relationship was a little bit difficult to navigate?
I always had a great relationship with both my parents. Um, I must confess, I am a spoiled brat. I think there's actually four of us that lived in the house. I do have there's five of us, but four of us that lived in the house. I'm the only one who was always asking and always insisting. I want this, I want that. And my sisters talk about how I had to have a round television. I had to have this, I had to have that. And unfortunately for my husband, my parents spoiled me. And that's why I said in my head I'm an only child because I wasn't thinking that they had three other mouths to feed. So as I got older, and I did have the rebellious teenage years with my mother. I drove my mother crazy. With my father, he worked 6 days a week, and he worked late. And on the weekends, when he came home late and tired, I would sit there and talk him to death. So after a hard day's work, it's like I have a million and one things to tell you, so you need to listen to me. So as he's eating, I'm talking. So I feel like I was a daddy's girl, but my sisters will say the same thing. But my mother was actually my best friend for so many years. It's like, how people feel they can't tell their mother anything. I told my mother everything. And even when I got married, her and my husband became so close to the point that she would take his side on things and say, I know my daughter. And she knew me. She knew me better than I knew myself. So I can say that we always had a great relationship. Other than the teenage years, I would say from 14 to 18. But other than that, is we we talk to each other about everything.
So my son is 15. That means I have 3 more years and then he'll become my best friend.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Because right now, ooh.
Believe me, with my daughter, I actually said in her senior year of high school, I think she lost her mind. I was ready to put her out. I was counting the days that she would leave to go to Hampton University because otherwise I would have ended up locked up somewhere. so yes, I think they test you from 14 to 18.
Right, definitely for sure.
Yes.
I'm going through it, y'all. I'm going through it. Pray for me. So tell me about your parents today. Are your parents still with you?
No, unfortunately, my father passed away at age 59,
Oh,
and
wow.
my mother passed away at age 90. She actually passed away in 2018. So yes,
Okay. So as your mother aged, your father passed relatively young.
yes.
Your mom continued on, well
Mhm.
after he passed. How was that? Did you feel like you had to provide some additional support for her as your dad passed? I also recently lost my dad last year, and I
Mhm.
know one of the major stresses for me over the last year has been ensuring that my mom was okay, and that
Mhm.
she had what she needed this year. So I definitely understand that feeling of, okay, dad's gone now, so we got to step up and be there for mom.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, um, when my father passed, we definitely was there for my mother. And my mother had a great group of friends that was always there for her also. But with my mother, I'm maybe I got that from her, but my mother was always on the go, always traveling, always doing. She did until she couldn't do anymore. She had what she called her Wednesdays was Be Good to Lonnie Day, And on Wednesdays, she would treat herself. She either went to see a play or she went shopping. She always did things. And what's interesting with my mother, you know, with the loss of her husband, she always had this like independence about her, where she felt that she didn't want to burden her children. But I would say with the last 5 years of her life is when she had to depend on her children. And that's from age 85 to 90. But prior to that, it was like, I mean, she, as a retired educator, she used to go to the UFT classes. So she exercised. She would travel. Like she had groups, friends. One friend had a timeshare in St. Martin, so she would go to St. Martin's. Another group had a timeshare in Aruba, so they went to Aruba. So and then she's part of a sorority. She was a Delta, so every convention and everything.
Are
Well,
you
my
also
daughter's a
part of the
Delta too, so
sorority?
you yes, yes. But one thing about my family, we're such a close knit family. We when we lived in the Bronx, on Andrews Avenue, it was a two-family house that became a three-family house. So when the children moved out, the grandchildren moved in. So my mother always had children and grandchildren around her. Then she moved to the Yonkers area, and it's same thing. It became a family house. There was always someone there. So we children, grandchildren, we always was together, always. And when my mother passed, as sisters, we said we have to stick together. Unfortunately, my brother passed away, but as the siblings, the sisters, we said, you know, this is what my mother want us to do, so we make sure that we do things together.
That's important.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me about your travels, right? So we retired 9 years ago. What have
Yeah.
you been doing the last 9 years? Tell us how you been living your best life?
I've been living it. Yes. I've traveled to all 50 states. And what's interesting is I went cross country in an RV twice. The first time was actually during the pandemic. And my two youngest grandchildren, it was time for them to go do virtual school because during the pandemic they couldn't go into school, and their parents had to go back to work. So we went down. They live in North Carolina. We went down to North Carolina. We brought them back to New Jersey. We set up the living room and dining room for the classroom. One was in first grade at the time, and the other one was in sixth grade. So we set up the two areas for them to have schooling. And as a retired educator, you know, I made it like a classroom. But this whole virtual school, and my hats off to all educators, all parents that had to go through this. I said, you know what, this is going to drive us crazy. So I said to my husband, why don't we rent an RV? I always wanted to do Route 66, Route 66. And surprisingly, he said yes. Like, it's like he was ready to get out the house also.
Listen,
And
you said you were spoiled. Your parents set the expectation, so he had to meet it.
so I asked my youngest sister, who was also doing virtual school. She was doing virtual school with a second grader. I asked if she wanted to go. So we rented an RV, a large RV, and we drove up to Chicago and went cross country to California, came back, and we was doing virtual school. And what was, I mean, it was great. It was challenging, but it was great. And I feel that that's the best education. Even when like we went to the Grand Canyon, and it was like nothing in school could compare to what
Right.
the the three grands went through. My sister's grand and my two grands. It's nothing at all. We stayed. We spent some nights in the RV. We stayed in a teepee in Arizona. We stayed in a cabin in one place. We stayed at a hotel in Chicago. We stayed at Airbnbs in LA and also in Texas. So it was like every day was a different adventure. And we got back and I said, you know what? I wouldn't mind doing this again. And my husband and I actually booked it to go to rent it the following year. And we did cross country, the northern United States. So that's how I got to see most of the United States. But we also did because my determination was to see all 50 states. So, for example, we flew up to Seattle and we drove all the way down to LA. We flew into New Orleans and then went to Alabama and Mississippi. Well, I took advantage of we have a timeshare, so I took advantage of the exchange. We did Arkansas, we did West Virginia, and my granddaughters actually went to 34 of the 50 states with us.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
It's interesting. We talk about the pandemic, and a lot of times what you hear about the pandemic are the negative things, are the loss of life and, the long-term effects, medical conditions that people are still struggling with. And, by no means am I making light of the pandemic, but there were some pretty amazing things that also came out of the pandemic that we need sometimes to take a moment to just reflect and say, wow, if it wasn't for that pandemic, would I have experienced this? If it wasn't for the pandemic, would I have left my administrative role and said, I'm going to start my own business? Everyone did think I was a little crazy. I mean, sometimes I reflect on it myself and I'm like, was I crazy? Was I going through like a little midlife crisis
Yeah.
when I did this? But listen, I think it was the best decision I ever made for my life.
Yeah.
Couldn't be happier, right? You're living your best life after retirement. Listen, I'm living my best life pre-retirement. But I would love to retire, rent an RV, and drive cross country.
And like you said, would I have the opportunity to spend so much time with my grandchildren? Would I have the opportunity to see? It's one thing. Okay, you check into a hotel here and you check into a hotel here, but going and just saying, okay, we're going to do something different this day, and we're going to check out a teepee. we're going to go to the Grand Canyon. And then even when it was my husband and I, and it was my husband and I, it was actually even a longer trip. And we said, can we be in an RV together all this time without throwing one of them out? But it was the best trip ever. I never felt so relaxed in my life. So when I tell people about RV, they're like, "Oh, I'm thinking about it." I'm like, "This is something that I think everyone should experience." And I ended up really focusing on the 50 states because people were saying, "Oh, you going to the Caribbean? Have you seen the United States?" And I'm like, "Okay, that's like living in New York and not even seeing the Statue of Liberty or the Empire State Building." I'm like, I guess I should see, and just knowing not only the difference in people. I felt like a sociologist. This observing people and observing landscapes and observing the political climates, because in the Midwest, their politics was different from my politics. So it was a learning experience for all of us. For all of us.
Okay, I got to put that on my bucket list now.
Yes. Yes.
So tell me now, how did you come to start your own business? Tell me about your book, your memoir. Tell us what is the title of it? Like, where can we pick it up?
Okay, I'm gonna start with my business, especially since you're a Delta. Um, when my mother started getting sick, she had a house, and we decided that it was time for her to downsize. So my sister and sister-in-law bought a house, and she moved in with them, and we sold her house. But she had, all the paraphernalia, t-shirts, bags, everything, Delta, Delta, Delta. She actually had a Delta room. So
Ah!
um, we packed it all up and we gave it to my daughter. And my daughter came to me and said, I have all these t-shirts. Can you make me a quilt? And I'm like, a quilt? I don't sew. I mean, my father was a tailor, but I don't sew. I took sewing lessons at the YWCA many years ago on 125th Street, but I don't sew. But I knew that t-shirts were so important to her that I started inquiring, where can I take quilting classes? And right here at the Teaneck Rada Center, they have the quilting class. And I went there and I said, I have these t-shirts. My daughter wants me to make a quilt. And they said, do you sew? I'm like, no. I said, I used to sew as a child. Have you ever made a quilt before? No. And they basically told me I had to start with the basics. So fast forward, I made the Delta quilt for my daughter. And prior to making her a quilt, I practiced on two other quilts for my granddaughters. So I made this Delta quilt. And being in the quilting class, they kept talking about this store in Rahway and how she has all this wonderful fabric. So I looked it up and I said, oh, she does classes too. So she had a string quilting class. So I went down there and I took her string quilting class. And I was making a quilt for my son, and he wanted all African print. And there's a shop, African Heritage Fashion, on Teaneck Road. She gave me scraps. She said, "You're making your son a quilt. You could have." It was actually head wraps and different pieces, and she just kept giving me fabric. So I took that down and I just learned how to string quilt. And it was basically, we did one block. So when I got home, I'm like, I'm going to make a pillow. And I ended up doing 4 blocks and putting it together as a pillow. And I went back to African Heritage Fashions, and I asked her about the mud cloth, and I said, I made this pillow and I want to put a mud cloth backing on it. And so she chose the mud cloth backing for me, not knowing that I was going to make the pillow for her. So I made the pillow for her, and I gave it to her, and she had it in her shop. And people started asking about the pillow, and they wanted to buy the pillow. And she was telling them to contact me. And she said, you should start. And I'm like, I'm not, I'm retired. I'm not getting into the business. And people were inquiring. So I started sewing, and her second stitch was birth
Wow.
from gifting a pillow to someone else, and ended up making pillows. So
So a Delta helped you start your business, in other words.
and she would be so happy to hear that. but as far as the book is concerned, when I was traveling, a friend of mine said, "Do you ever thought of writing a book about all your travels?" And I said, "No." I said, "I journal. I journal all the time. I'm always promoting journaling. Keep telling people they should journal." And I started thinking about it. And as I'm traveling, I started writing about the travels. And then I'm like, but I don't want it just to be about travel. I thought about, different things that I talk to people about, the different things that I preach about. And I said, it needs to be more. So in my book, I talk about marriage. I had to let my husband read the chapter on marriage because, like me, I'm an open book, but that doesn't mean that he wants our business out in the street.
Right, right.
So I gave it to him and I said, "There's anything that you want me to take out, I'll take out." And he said, "That's your perspective. You can keep it." So I wrote about marriage. I wrote about aging. Some of the things about aging we don't discuss, but it's in my chapter. I talked about stigmas and and how certain things we feel are taboo. I talk about counseling, having a therapist. I talk about my issues. I talk I talk about anxiety. I talk about my ADHD, my impulsive personality. So that's in the book. Of course, I talked about starting a business. Talk about traveling. I talked about retirement and how it was time for me to do me. Um, for many reasons, health reasons, mental reasons, but how I knew that I wasn't being of service anymore. I was still being of service to the children, but I lost that luster to be there for everybody. So and which is so easy as an administrator because you bog down in all directions. So that's also in the book. Um, I talk about oh I talked about loss and different types of losses, and I talked about how I remember every major loss in my life, and I recommend to other people that if they can't get past a loss, and there's all types of loss, a loss of a job, a loss of a loved one, a loss of a pet, and there's all types of loss. If you can't get past it, it's okay to reach out for help. I
Mm.
talk about my ministry. I talk about being a foodie because I love to eat. And I also talked about weight loss. After I retired, one of the things I wanted to do was work out, and I working out 6 days a week. Then I went down to 5 days a week. Right now I'm working out about 4 days a week, and I lost almost 40 pounds.
Oh,
So so
and I could be just like you.
and basically, I feel like my book is to help somebody. To it's my journey, but hopefully to help somebody. I talk about how I'm not good with money. I feel like it wasn't until I turned 65 and I'm 67 now that I knew how to handle money. Because my whole thing was spend, 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 and then figure it out later. Just like I told you, I jump into these things and then try to figure it out. And I learned I had to do it differently with money, especially since I'm saying I'm going to travel. I talk about how when my children were growing up, Marshalls had a layaway plan, and back to school, summer clothes, everything was on layaway, and you pay down, and that's how I do with traveling. I put away money that I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it, and then when I'm ready to go, I have that money. So I try to use that same mentality. So I talk about that in the book too. But
What is the book title?
okay, completion.
Ah, I
Yes,
love it.
completion. And it's stitching together life's journey.
All right, where can we pick it up?
And you can get it from my website, which is SRBO Next Chapter, Sheila Renee Burns-Owens Next Chapter.com. So it's SRBO Next Chapter.com. You can also get it from Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, any bookstore. But I prefer that you get it from directly from me. I will sign your copy. I will write a special note to you. So it's available for all of you
All right,
right
give
now.
me the title one more time.
Okay.
SRBO.
Yeah. It's SRBO nextchapter.com.
SRBOnextchapter.com, everybody.
Yes.
We got to pick up our copies of the book. So when we grow up, we could be just like you. So this is amazing. What a journey. What a journey you have had. I can't wait to read the book because I have not had the privilege of reading it just yet. But it is definitely going to be on the top of my summer reads book. If you had to identify what was the most difficult part of the book for you to write, um, what would that be?
Hmm. I think the most difficult part, because it wasn't just about me, was writing about my marriage. And I talk about how we still do, I still do, we still do. Um, because marriage is work. And you know, we try to glamorize marriage, but marriage is work. And in my book, I talk about our different stages, how in our 20s, it was more lust. And then in our 30s, we became parents and the whole dynamic changed. And I think I apologized for what I had to put my husband through as my hormones changed. So I think I came to myself. 30s and 40s was difficult. I even talk about how we purchased a house at age 30 that we couldn't even afford. And our whole concept on on money was, okay, we have enough for the mortgage, but what about everything else?
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that I didn't think about, and I think that was the hardest part because it exposed, um, and I'm not going to say a lack of a better word because this is the word, our ignorance, and 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 how in our 50s we might have felt freer, but then we retired, and we retired at age 58, both of us, and we had to figure out, do we even like each other, or were we distracted first by the children and then by our jobs? So that it's like different stages that we had to go through that I wrote out in the book. And even though it's exposing my relationship, I pray that it helps somebody else's relationship, because people are so quick to say, I can't do this. But if God ordained it, you can do it. And God put unlike people together to complete each other. And in my book, it talks about what I'm not, he is, and what he's not, I am. And I have in there that if we were alike, one of us would be unnecessary. So the hardest part, I would say, is the marriage part, because it's not just my journey, it's also his journey. So
No, I
that,
definitely have to read
yeah.
it.
And then
And
when
you're
my
so
children
right
find
about
out,
the decades. We go through different stages as individuals and as a couple.
mhm,
And as you talked about your stages, I'm like, yeah, 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 I remember that. Oh, we're going through that right now.
we met each other. We were 19 and 20 years old. and now, and now we're 67 years old. So it's like, okay, a lot in between. We are completely different people. I mean, we have that core. And we even talk about how, and I write about it, how we were brought up similarly, but different. We still had different outlooks on a lot of things, including raising our children. So, and including what we want to do when we retire. I want to see the world. He wants to take naps and relax. So it's like, we both talk about we've been doing for so long, but I want to do and see new things, and he wants to do and stop doing and just relax. So those are things
So
that you don't think
funny
about when you're
when
in
you talk
early
about
20s.
44 years of marriage,
Yeah,
right? And again,
yes,
it's just like I just said, we see the finished product,
yes,
right? The book is
yes.
called Completion.
Completion.
Completion, right? 44 years, mother, wife, educator, author, business. You hear all of these accolades, right?
Mhm.
And again, you naturally, it's instinctly, I just say, oh, I want that. I want
Mm.
that. but being able to understand what it takes to get to that 44 years of marriage, to get to having two amazing children. They got on your nerves. It's good to know that, because sometimes
Mhm.
I'm like, am I doing this all wrong? Like, what am I
Well,
doing wrong here? But it's good to know that there are other moms who have made it and their
mhm.
kids are grown and well adjusted and they have the same challenges that I'm having, right? And so it's so important for us to share our story. So I thank you so, so much
I
um,
thank you for this.
sharing your story with us today. So my last question for you, I like to
Mhm.
respect time and I know we're a little bit over. Um, my last question for you is, if you had one piece of advice that you would offer to younger women coming up, what would that piece of advice be?
To make a plan. And I don't like the word goal, because it's like when you don't reach your goal, you feel like you failed. But make a plan, and decide if that plan is really your plan. Is it something that you want to do, not what somebody else wants you to do? And whatever that plan is, stick to it. Know that it's not going to happen right away. But if that's your plan, just keep working at it, and you might have to take baby steps sometimes. Sometimes you might take giant steps. Sometimes you have to take backward steps, but make that plan and stick with your plan. I'm famous for post-its. It's like, write it somewhere, put it on your screensaver, something, put it on your refrigerator, put it on your mirror. But make that plan, know that it's going to take time, but it's your plan, and say, I know I'm going to do it, and you will do it.
There you have it.
Yeah.
There you have it. Make a plan and stick to it. So,
Yeah.
Sheila, thank you again so much for joining us today. I know my viewers and listeners definitely are going to pick up tons of nuggets from our conversation, but of course, from picking up the book, RBO,
Oh, next chapter.
SRBO Next
Next chapter.
Chapter.com.
Yeah.
Thank you again. To my listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of Women in Leadership with the Sunflower. Filled with the brightest of sunflowers, even on the cloudiest of days. Wishing you love and positive vibes. Until next time.